So we're going to talk about wireless networking here and wireless networking security, right? The 802.11 standards and what security was built in from the beginning, which wasn't much, and then how they added security onto Wi-Fi. We'll talk about confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication, IEEE standards, and then what are the EAPs? There's a variety of different EAPs, right? And authentication methods. EAP stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol, right? We've got LEAPs and PEEPs and EAPs with TLS and TTLS, right? And then we'll talk about some other things that you should know in order to know whether or not your wireless is more or less secure, such as TKIP and AES. What's a WAN threat? That should be W-A-N capitalized, right? Wide area network, hacking methods, rogue APs, detecting wireless networks. And we'll talk about some other types of wireless networks, right, like Bluetooth. Now, there is actually a version of 802.11 Wi-Fi which is going to come out, which is going to be a competitor for Bluetooth, where you actually build Wi-Fi into wireless keyboards and microphone, headphones and microphones and everything else. So we'll see if Bluetooth, strongly competes against it or not. But Wi-Fi is becoming ubiquitous almost everywhere. People are building Wi-Fi into devices. So wireless network has become a huge industry. Lots of people use it. We've noticed that among our student population with undergrads, almost all the undergrads use Wi-Fi exclusively. Almost none of them ever plug their computer into a hardwired Ethernet port. Even among employees and faculty, among staff and faculty, many of them now are just using Wi-Fi and they're not plugging into their office Ethernet ports either. So there are some pros and there are cons to that approach. It makes you much more mobile and flexible. On the other hand, it makes you more susceptible to people eavesdropping on you, right? Unless you're using our secure Wi-Fi. And it also means that you're somewhat less reliable. And we also have to worry about making sure we get bandwidth to you, because if you're on the wired network, it's a little bit easier for us to guarantee bandwidth and allocate bandwidth through wiring, etc. If you're all on a shared network, because that's what Wi-Fi is, you're sharing bandwidth resources with all the other Wi-Fi users. If there's only one AP and there's lots of users sharing that AP, then what happens? They're getting a decreasing small amount of the bandwidth, right, that's available to them. Now, bandwidth has gone up, so Wi-Fi APs can push out a lot more bandwidth these days than when Wi-Fi initially came out. But still, you have to really saturate an area with wireless APs in order to get people the big bandwidth that they need sometimes. With wireless, we can give them 1 gig Ethernet, and eventually we'll be able to give them 10 gig Ethernet. Right now we just use 10 gig in a few data centers for a few different servers, etc. But people can get 1 gig bandwidth on wired Ethernet pretty easily. You can't get that on Wi-Fi, right? You're just limited to what with Wi-Fi? 54 megabits per second. Yeah.
It depends on the amount of radios you have.
Mm-hmm.
There's two vendors that will put 3 radios in, so you get 2 out of 3 at any given time.
But for most office users, that's sufficient bandwidth for what they do. They're just reading email and sending documents to the printer, occasionally browsing the internet. And the internet speed's going to be less than that. But now people have Wi-Fi in their homes, right? There are even people who have Wi-Fi in their cars. There are people that have Wi-Fi on trains and planes and buses and you name it these days. The problem is that it's putting a signal out in the air where anybody can reach out and grab it, right? And they can listen to it. So here's somebody with a big antenna, right, picking it up. You also have other kinds of Wi-Fi, right? So here we've got somebody's community, and we've got RF leakage. They've actually, and I don't know how well you can see the colors in this one, but there's like a heat map here of the different areas in which the signal is strong, from strong to weak. And so you can see in this area, we can actually pick up the signal from 1 AP. And sometimes you can go quite a bit further than Wi-Fi was originally intended. And if you do use things like shotgun antennas, so that you can both transmit and receive, using a parabolic antenna or shotgun antenna, almost line of sight, you can make them go much farther. You can go a mile or so with Wi-Fi if you so choose. You can pick up the signals. People have picked them up from airplanes, flying high above.
Colorado, these guys shoot, it's in a valley, you guys shoot.
Now, normally if you use it in the house, there are certain objects that will try to stop it. So, metallic objects, painted walls, all that stuff, they stop the signal. But once you're outside and in the open, the signal travels a lot farther. Which means people can drive around looking for the signal, pick it up. Your neighbors can use your Wi-Fi signal and hop on the internet, or more nefariously, because some people wouldn't mind if somebody shares their signal with them, but if they start looking at your traffic or trying to break into your computers, that's another thing. This is the risk of the attack from afar, right? And see these different zones? It's showing the Wi-Fi access points and their different zones of coverage here. So that's supposed to be some corporate headquarters. Now they've located the corporate headquarters way out in the woods here somewhere, right? So it makes it a little bit harder for somebody to get to it. But notice there's still roads here somebody can drive along, or they can park along here and they can pick up the signal. There's lots and lots of, sensitive places here in the DC area. So originally 802.11 was developed for military use, for building mobile networks for the military to use out in the field. Security first became a topic for Wi-Fi after Peter Shipley gave a presentation at DEF CON in 2001 on war driving, where he talked about how he drove around an area and he was able to find lots and lots of networks. And in most cases, he was able to join the network, connect, and often get on the internet through that. I used to be able to do this in many places, and especially at trade shows. You'd go there and there'd be loads of wireless networks from all the vendors showing their wares or whatever. Most of the time you could just hop right on the internet through them or whatever. Very few people used WEP back then, so there was no encryption, and very few of them required other passwords or other methods to join. Very few people use MAC address filtering too. It's just too much of a pain, right? So the Department of Homeland Security labeled Wi-Fi a terrorist threat, demanded regulation. Now, we have other types of radio frequencies which are data networks as well that run over wireless radio signals, right? Some of them have ridden over them for a long time. Some of them are analog. Some of them are digital in terms of their modulation, right? The pager networks. The pager networks are very old, very low bit rate. Almost nobody carries a pager today. What do they use instead? Right? Cell phones with SMS or whatever. So I used to carry an alphanumeric pager. Before that, I just carried a regular pager, but none these days. But over time, along with the evolution of cellular phones, there have been several different mobile data networks. Now, some of those mobile data networks were proprietary, and they were just designed for use by repair people or field technicians that were sent out. I don't know if you ever saw IBM people would go out into the field, and they'd have these radio devices with keyboards, and they would use some private data networks that ran over radio waves. Some of them are satellite-based, some of them are terrestrial-based with towers, etc., type of things. These are just some of the low-speed, non-Wi-Fi networks, right? Cellular packet data, 19.2 kbits per second. Usually people refer to that as baud as well, which stands for baudot, right? GPRS, global positioning radio signal here. Much higher rate, 171 kbits per second, and digital. WAP, which is actually a content delivery system, right? Ricochet was a proprietary system out here. It's called a broadband flop because they tried to get home users. And it also was used for mobile users. They marketed people as taking their laptop around and getting on Ricochet networks. Today, these have mostly been superseded by what? They were superseded by a protocol for a while called 1xRTT, which was a one of the first digital ones. And then along came the 2G and 3G, and now we have 4G networks, right? Yep. So, but this was one of the original company proprietary versions that came out. What's Bluetooth? Bluetooth is also not Wi-Fi. It's not 802.11, but it's its own format. And it was designed as a PAN. What's a PAN? Or a piconet, which means a very small network, right? Pico meaning small. It's really only designed to work within a radius of what? Right. A few feet to a few yards. And the original use for Bluetooth was as a cable replacement. so that you could have cordless and cableless devices, and you could, print to your printer as long as you were within range of that printer, right? Some places also use infrared instead. You have infrared cordless keyboard, and there were printers that would take an infrared signal and you could print directly to them, right? BlackBerry, what does it use? Uses the regular digital cellular networks, and it also uses PCS networks for data. No authentication at the console. And then we have all the IEEE 802.11 networks, right? What we call Wi-Fi or wireless LANs is 802.11. There's also 802.15, which are the wireless PANs. For example, Bluetooth is 802.15. And then we have another system at 802.16, which is a wireless broadband meant to be used by distribution to homes and businesses, etc., right?